Sure. Swallow is a psychological horror movie meets dark comedy meets domestic drama about a woman in an unhappy marriage who develops the compulsion to eat dangerous objects. I think the main visual theme that we had is this, like, facade of normalcy, like a pane of glass that you see a crack slowly forming in it. I loved the idea of this character who was in a world where she felt that she constantly had to mirror and reflect what others wanted of her, realized she was in this oppressive patriarchal system, but then repressed that, and then her primal self comes out in these quiet rebellions in this unusual way, and then leads her towards her true essence. And so I guess that is kind of the theme, that idea of that pane of glass with the crack forming in it. I like the concept of the multiple layers of interpretation. That's what interests me. I mean, if you have OCD or you have any kind of psychological compulsion or state of being, you'll know that it's kind of everything is in layers. So you could see the film and you could say, yes, well, the compulsion, the pica, is in many ways a reaction to the world that she's living in, to that oppressive paradigm that her husband is exhibiting. And her rituals of control are, in a sense, being triggered by that. But then you could also say, well, but why do they appear? Is there something deeper, in her past, or some other element that's at play? And indeed, she must find that out also. And I think they are all something that affects the compulsion. The movie was inspired by my grandmother, who was a homemaker in the 1950s, who was an obsessive hand washer. She had many rituals of control designed to give herself a sense of order in a life she felt increasingly powerless in. And she would go through 4 cakes of soap a day, 12 bottles of rubbing alcohol a week. And eventually my grandfather, at the advice of the doctors, put her into a mental institution where she was given electroshock therapy and insulin shock therapy, and had a non-consensual lobotomy where she lost her sense of taste and smell. And I always felt like she was being punished in a way for not living up to society's expectations of what they felt a wife or a mother should be, or for being different. So I knew her after she had gotten out of the hospital, and when she was older. And she developed agoraphobia, which was another kind of, ritual of control. So I was around for that. And I had a great deal of empathy for her, and for what she went through. And I, got her, file from the institute, and found a lot of there was a lot of heartbreaking and interesting things about her story, and so I wanted to make a film about that. Hand washing is not very cinematic. So, I remember seeing an image of the contents of someone's stomach, of a patient who had pica, kind of fanned out like the rays of the sun. And it almost seemed like an archaeological dig, and I really wanted to know what drew that person to those objects. It felt like a Holy Communion or, mystical experience, and so I wanted to investigate that further. And I think that I like the idea that I collect little objects myself, and my own OCD has a lot to do with like arranging little objects, arranging objects in patterns. And I think there's something comforting when you reduce the world's problems to one small thing that you can adjust, like flipping a coin from tails to heads. That will keep me safe today. You know what I mean? And there's that kind of idea of reducing chaos into a fine point. But it can also be painful to have these kinds of compulsions. It's not, it can be painful and it can be very difficult. And so I wanted to show that, but also show that through the journey she takes, it allows her to sort of question her life and say, well, why am I feeling this way? What's going on here? So I worked with the world's expert on pica, Dr. Rachel Bryant-Waugh, and she actually wrote a case study of Hunter as if she was a patient of hers, which was great. And then I did a lot of research about the condition and reached out to people online. And one of the things that's interesting was there was a person who we heard about through making the movie, who would swallow toothbrushes on a regular basis, and then he had to have them surgically removed every month. And I thought a lot about him while making the movie, too. So, yeah, I was really lucky that the wonderful actor Laith Knockley decided to join the production. He's from Syria, and so when we were talking about the character, the idea really appealed to me that someone who was not from the world that Hunter and her family was in would come into the situation, and that the two of them at first would be pitted against each other by the powers that be. That idea of like divide and conquer, and that at first Lue would see her as being someone that he whose pain didn't make sense to him. And that she would see him as not an ally, and that then eventually they both would find a bond and find a connection. And I think that since Lue's been through war and he's seen oppression in a much more extreme version, he recognizes it in this more subtle version. He recognizes the parents' control and assertion and the role that he's being asked to do to enforce that. And in the scene, and I've heard a lot of people say that they love the bond between the two of them, or that that's something they really appreciate and feel close to, and I was so gratified to hear that. I'm obsessed with symbol, metaphor, microcosms. I love that idea. And so, yeah, in the opening of the film, we do this cross-cutting thing between this lamb being slaughtered and between Hunter preparing to go to a dinner, and then the two cross-cut to the lamb being served where Hunter goes to the dinner. And I think that idea and the fact that she lives in this glass house that's like a display case, I wanted it to feel like some extension of some corruption or some concept of the American dream, but gone horribly awry, and I like the idea of her within that, because in America, we're constantly being sold this bill of goods of what we should all be aspiring to, and you see it in advertisements everywhere, this, wealthy, white, patriarchal nuclear family, existing in, their isolated world as something that we all should be, trying to be like. And it's this lie that perpetrates America and causes a lot of, and the world, and causes a lot of distress and sinister things to happen. And I think I wanted to investigate what was lurking beneath the surface there and break that apart. And so, and I think it's also sort of one of these things in America that's, we're all told that the American dream is a level playing field, but it's all a fair shake, But the truth is that it's like, if you start at a certain place, with a certain amount of privilege, you have a much better chance of leading the life of a successful, whatever that means, person. So yeah, I wanted to investigate the sort of corruption under that. And her in the midst of that world, and she's from a working class background, but still she was brought into that world and deemed acceptable. Her in the midst of that doing something strange and sort of destructive and weird, I thought was the perfect, metaphor for being in the belly of the beast and then, you know, causing an ulcer. Yes, and thank you for saying that. We wanted the film. Someone else was saying that it felt like Hunter was always alone in the frame, or dominated by the frame, or there was something. The space, she's lost in the space, you know. And yes, I really wanted that feeling. There's an odd sensation that happens when you are technically a part of a community, supposedly, but you know, you're part of a family or whatever. But you feel, or relationship, but you find yourself feeling lonely. And it's a very strange feeling because you have to repress it. Well, this doesn't make sense. Why am I feeling this? Well, it doesn't make sense. I'm going to file it away in the cabinet of, you know, unexamined emotions. But those emotions have significance, and I think there is a massive loneliness that's spreading across the world now. You know, I think everyone more and more through social media or whatever it is becoming isolated, and then their mind is like, you know, consuming itself, you know. And so I think yes, and the moment with the hug is an interesting scene because Ritchie is often doing something where he will abandon Hunter in a social setting. So he'll like bring her to the party, but then he'll like just leave her alone, you know. And Aaron notices her, you know, and he's one of the, even though he's going over there to sort of like, you know, flirt and be, you know, kind of provocative, he notices her, and when he expresses that he's lonely also and the hug happens, it becomes an interesting moment, I think.
She says thank you to
yeah, and she transforms the situation. It's one of the first moments where she takes control and changes things and sort of alters the moment into being something different. But yes, there's this, I think that all the characters in their way are isolated and lonely. You know, if you're struggling with a mental illness or some kind of anxiety condition, there are many different ones. I think one of the things that immediately happens is that you get frightened and you say to yourself, why is my brain doing this to me? And you don't tell anyone because you don't want people to get concerned, and then that's where the problem starts because you're isolated and you don't have the tools to deal with it. And I think that having OCD, having anxiety issues, or having depression, to me it's all the same thing, which is it's like an alarm bell going off. Your mind is sort of telling you like, something needs to change. We need to take action. And if you think about it more, instead of like a breakdown, if you think about it more like a breakthrough, you can see that there's a lot to learn within it. And you should reach out to people and try to get help from medical professionals you feel that you can trust and feel a connection to. And everyone finds different ways of coping. Meditation, sometimes medication can work, or different kinds of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And you can find a way to understand what's happening and the systems to manage it. And I think you can also ask a question of like, where's this coming from? What am I feeling? And Hunter asks that question a lot. What's going on in the life that I'm leading? Maybe this isn't the life I really want to be leading. You know, how can I take advantage of what's happening? But I think, you know, for anyone who's dealing with that and struggling with that, the important thing to remember is don't lose hope. There are many other people out there who have OCD or who are dealing with some kind of anxiety issues, and life is not easy. It is a struggle. It's a constant struggle, and that's okay. It's okay to be struggling. You know what I mean? Like, that's part of the journey. That's part of what it means to be human. Love yourself for it. Don't turn on yourself, and try to understand it and forgive yourself. Find a way through. Yeah, okay, so love both of those directors. Terrence Malick, yes. Wes Anderson, yes. Love him. And yes, I mean, oh my God. I mean, I remember the first time I saw Rushmore, first time I saw Royal Tenenbaums, I was like, oh my God. And it was because his specificity of character being reflected through costume and set pieces. I mean, his incredible use of symmetry in frames and production design, colors, and I mean, I just am in love with all of that. And I think that You know, he also, you know, a lot of people talk about his production design, but the personal and tender nature of Wes Anderson's characters is really heartfelt, you know, a lot of the times. And I love Terrence Malick's use of nature and the psychology versus nature. Very a lot like Tarkovsky's use of that. I also love, I mean, a lot of the other films that influenced me was like Todd Haynes' Safe, Chantal Ackerman's movies, Jordan Peele, Get Out. You know, I actually went to high school with Jordan. He was 1 year older than me, and he took me under his wing when I was like 14, and showed me The Shining and Akira. And seeing those movies, I was like, oh my God, you know. And of course, I've followed Jordan's career ever since then, and I'm so in awe of him. And I thought Get Out was like a great example of the kind of film I would like to make, you know, that sort of, it's a genre film, right? It's like, it's a horror movie, but he uses the horror to talk about like true horror in America, in life, and in the mind, and society, and yeah, it's great work.